Okay, let's hear this.
Oh, nice. I almost drank your water. Did you have a sip of that?
I didn't touch it.
Okay, I'll take a sip. This isn't going to turn me into a liberal, is it? I've already been accused of being a liberal. Okay, sir. Well, they do accuse me.
Okay, what's going on here? Mark Carney and Doug Ford's 2000K saving isn't a gift to you. It's a 8.8 billion bailout for developer. Ooh. I mean, developers are showing a lot of strain. I could see them trying to bail them out. The DC scam, cutting development fees doesn't lower prices. I mean, it does. The cheaper it is to develop, simple supply demand, you know, cheaper things are to develop, the lower you'll be able to buy it for. Certainly, people that elevate prices, generally, the housing market is still a free market. It just boosts builder margins. I mean, from what I understand, most developers are underwater. Like, their margins have become negative because they were building for a housing boom that is contracting. Builders sell for what the market will bear, not what the house costs to make. I mean, I was under the impression that builders are getting absolutely destroyed in the current environment. Like, let me check that. How are Canadian home builders doing today? Home developers? Because from what I understand, like starts are down. Um, the developers are not being able to make money off their their new builds. The state of Canadian home developers in early 2010s can be described as cautiously paralyzed. While the Carney government is aggressively trying to jumpstart the industry with a massive new federal agency, private developers are currently caught between record high construction costs, customer base that can't pass a stress test. Here is the current breakdown of the industry's health. The Matrimi metric, revenue up, orders down. Major developers like Matty Homes are essentially living off their past successes. Q1 2026 results show a significant revenue bump, up 20%, but that is mostly from closing, delivering houses sold years ago. The warning signs. Their net sales orders and backlogs have plummeted by nearly 16% and 37% respectively. Desperate measures. A sign of how tough the market is, Matrimony Alberta recently started offering to pay the first year of mortgage payments for new buyers. Classic bottom of the cycle incentive to keep inventory moving. To pay the first year of mortgage payment. So if you get mortgage payment, like I think they do 30 years or 20 years. That's to like 5% of the house. And that's just to keep inventory. The Edmonton exception. National numbers hide a massive split. Oh, I've heard about this before. Ontario and BC at near 2 decade lows. Toronto condo market is effectively on ice because pre-construction sales have evaporated. Like when you talk about housing, you got to talk about it in two different areas because Ontario and BC have become so overinflated. The prairies and Quebec doing surprisingly well. Edmonton and Calgary are currently the growth engines. Multi-unit starts holding steady thanks to lower land costs and a more favorable regulatory environment. The elephant in the room. Build Canada Homes. Biggest shift in 2026 is the launch of the Build Canada Homes Corporation. For the first time in decades, the federal government is acting as a developer, using public land, 40 billion in financial to push modular and prefabricated construction. So the Canadian government is getting into the housing business. Like I don't know if this will solve the problem. Best way to build housing is to make it so that housing developers can make a profit. And as long as housing developers can make a profit, we'll get infinite home until they no longer make a profit. Either way, it looks like in certain places in the country, Ontario and BC, developers don't appear to be doing very well. In some places, they seem to be doing just fine. Where was I? Reading one of the. Cutting development fees doesn't lower prices. It does. It just boosts builder margins. Some places, margins are horrible. Builders sell for what the market will bear, not what the house costs to make. Now, there is definitely truth in that. Builders sell for what the market will bear. That's because we've essentially allowed a monopoly of an algorithm to boost housing prices. I hear about an algorithm that is setting home prices. Can you tell me more about this? VHST bait, a 1 year window, is designed to clear developer inventory, not create long term affordability. No idea what they're talking about. The property tax trap. While cities lose fee revenue, you pay for the pipes and roads through your property tax bill. Government is subsidizing the supply side, but you inherit the debt. The housing plan. Is this a housing plan or I mean can't let all the home developers go out of business. And so I could absolutely see this being a bailout for developers. But like, what's the alternative? Let the developers go bust, and then there's no new homes, and that is absolutely going to send house prices skyrocketing. I don't know the specifics of what they're doing. Is there a way? I'm gonna look up the specifics as soon as I about this. The algorithm you're likely hearing about is a type of yield management software, specifically one called RealPage, and its competitor Yardi. The algorithms have been used for years to estimate home values. These newer platforms are being accused of something much more controversial, acting as a digital cartel to keep rents and home prices artificially high. As of early 2026, there is a breakdown of how this technology is reshaping the housing market, why it's currently in the crosshairs of the Department of Justice, how the algorithm works. In a traditional market, if a landlord or developer has empty units, they might lower the price to attract tenants. The algorithm changes that instinct. Data sharing. Thousands of landlords feed their non public, sensitive data, exactly what every tenant is paying, when lease ends, real time occupancy, into a central pool. Price coordination. The algorithm analyzes this private data across an entire city and tells landlords exactly what to charge. The no discount rule. The software often suggests keeping a unit empty rather than lowering the rent. It calculates that it's more profitable for a building to be 90% full at a higher price than 100% full at a lower price. The hard to override feature, one of the most damning pieces of evidence in the recent Department of Justice lawsuit, which reached a major turning point in January 2026, is how the software handles human intervention. The justification requirement. If a property manager wants to ignore the algorithm and offer a lower price to a struggling tenant, the software often forces them to write a business justification. Escalation. If they override the algorithm too often, the software can escalate the rejection to a regional manager. This creates a culture where humans stop using their judgment and simply auto accept whatever the machines. They've created a software that is highly efficient at extracting as much value from the tenants as possible. Now it's used everywhere. That that's what you have to go after if you want to lower housing prices right there. The 2026 legal fallout. Backlash against algorithm price fixing has become a massive political issue this year. The US in December 2025 and January 2026, DOJ secured major settlements and proposed final judgment against companies like LiveCore. This bars them from using software that relies on non public competitor data. Basically, the government is trying to force these algorithms to only use public data to make them less effective at price fixing. Canada. The Competition Bureau of Canada just concluded a massive civil investigation into RealPage and Yardi this month, March 2026. Interesting, they found that while the tools are being used, they haven't reached a critical mass in Canada to essentially harm competition, unlike in the US, where in some cities 70% of apartments are priced by the same algorithm. So it's not as popular in Canada. I mean, let's keep it that way. About buying a home, well, the scandal is loudest in the rental market. Similar automated value models are being used by large institutional investors to buy up single family homes. Quantarium and PropStream use AI to analyze nearly 900 factors, local school ratings to the foreclosure risk of specific neighborhoods to outbid regular families before a house even hits the open market. By the time you see a for sale sign, the algorithm has often already decided exactly what the house is worth to an investor's portfolio, making it nearly impossible for individuals to negotiate. The commodification of housing, that's going to cause us a lot of issues. That is causing us a lot of issues. The big picture. The concern isn't that a computer is doing math, it's that the math is being used to remove competition. If every landlord in your city is using the same brain to set prices, they aren't really competing with each other anymore. They're a monopoly in disguise. Do you think it's fair for the government to ban companies from sharing their own data? It leads to higher prices for everyone. I mean, decommodifying housing would solve it. Remove the investor from the picture. That might have downstream consequences. Let's see what it has to say. If you decommodified housing in Canada, would that lower the house price? Decommodifying housing is the nuclear option of economic policy. In theory, it wouldn't just lower house prices, it would fundamentally change what a price even represents. In the current Canadian market, a house price is determined by its speculative value, what someone thinks it's worth in 10 years, and its investment yield, how much rent it can generate. Decommodifying strips those away, leaving only its use value, the cost to build and maintain a place to live. To build and maintain a place to live. Like, that's what I think it should be. Here's how that shift would likely play out in Canada, in the Canada of 2026. The immediate investor exodus. Quickest way to lower prices is to remove the extra bidders. Currently, a significant chunk of Canada real estate is bought by investors ranging from mom and pop landlords to institutional giants. The result, if you pass laws that prevent housing from being used as a profit generating asset, investors will sell immediately, naturally. Price drop. This sudden flood of supply, coupled with the total disappearance of investor demand, would likely cause an immediate and massive correction in market prices. Of course, you kick the investors out, house prices would fall. The issue is what negative effects that will cause. Like, if house prices go down at the current house prices, developers are struggling places throughout the country. Could it become unprofitable entirely to build homes? That just stop the construction of them? Let's see. Shifting to cost plus pricing. Under a decommodified model, similar to the Build Canada Homes initiatives we're seeing today, price of a home is tied to the cost of construction and land, not what the market can bear. The math. Condo costs 300,000 to build, it stays 300 adjusted for inflation maintenance. Doesn't become just because a new subway station opened by. The catch, well, this makes entry level housing affordable. It removes the wealth building aspect that 60% of Canadians currently rely on for their retirement. Like, the housing bubble's gonna pop. It is like they are trying the slow deflate method right now, and it's just going to panic people. Um, Using your house, like your house should appreciate with like inflation, but it shouldn't over appreciate. Using a house for retirement should be like paying into like a savings account. But housing has just gone up so much for so long that so many people now depend on price of their house for the retirement. All right, number 3, the equity trap, the political reality. This is where the theory hits a wall. For decades, the Canadian government has encouraged citizens to treat their homes as their primary saving account. Conflict to lower prices significantly enough to make them affordable for the bottom 40% of earners would have to essentially wipe out hundreds of billions of dollars in paper wealth held by the middle class and seniors. The 2026 stance, the Carney government current value-based realism tries to split the difference. I mean, try and split the difference, you're going to get the worst of both worlds. They aren't trying to lower existing home prices, which would be political suicide. They're trying to flood the market with non-market options, social housing and co-ops, to make the market price irrelevant for people who just need a roof. I mean, I'm happy they're doing something, but if I was prime minister, I would decommodify the shit out of housing. Like, okay, we were talking about the Netherlands here. The Netherlands warning, as we discussed with the Dutch model, decommodification has a major side effect: stagnation, lack of mobility. Housing is decommodified and rents are ultra low. Nobody ever moves. This creates the 15-year wait list problem. Supply issues. Without a profit motive, private developers stop building. The government must then become the only developer, which requires massive, consistent taxpayer funding that can be cut whenever a new party takes power. The verdict. Would it lower the price? Yes, absolutely. It would likely trigger the largest price drop in Canadian history. The real question is Canada ready for that trade-off? Decommodification means housing is no longer a way to get rich. For a country, real estate accounts for a massive chunks of the GDP. It's not just a policy change, it's an economic organ transplant. If we move to a system where you could buy a home for the cost of building it, but you could never sell it for a profit, would you still want one? Want to own one? Yes. You need one to live, or would you rather just have a guaranteed high quality rental? If we moved to a system where you could buy a home for the cost of building it, but you could never sell it for a profit, would you still want to own one, or would you rather just have a guaranteed high quality rental? I mean, I would still want to own a home because the money you put towards it is yours. Even if you can't sell it for a profit, sell it for the value you've put in. Sure, there's like wear and tear, but thing is, like, there's definitely issues because we see it in the Dutch model. So, but that's like that's social housing. And it seems like Canada is trying to go that route to flood the market with non-market options, people who just need a roof. Like housing should, I believe, should still be a free market thing. But there's ways that you could go to prevent investors from owning large quality quantities of home. Supply issues, profit motive, private development. Like you would still allow developers to profit. But you would like limit investors, how much investors can expose themselves to the housing market. You could limit owning a property to a citizenship. Like you could only have like one property, or like one residential and one business property for a citizen. So many issues there. Has anywhere in the world decommodified housing? Is there any working examples of this? Like you don't want to go the socialism route. That never works. Never works. Decommodified. Yeah, that's what I meant. There are a few world-class examples where housing is treated more like a public utility than a speculative asset. While no country is 100% decommodified its enticing housing stock, Vienna, Singapore, and Finland are the closest the world has to a housing first reality. I like all those places. All those places seem to be doing well. Vienna, Australia, the social mix gold thing. Vienna is often called a renter's utopia because the city decided a century ago that housing was too important to be left to the market. Scale. As of 2026, roughly 43% of all housing in Vienna is social housing, either city owned or limited profit associations. The cost plus model. The associations are legally required to calculate rent based on the actual cost of building and maintaining the unit, not what people are willing to pay. The middle class reality. Unlike in North America, where public housing is often a last resort, Vienna income thresholds are high. 2,000 a year for a single person. This means doctors and teachers live next door to service workers, preventing the ghettoization of social housing. The middle class reality. Unlike in North America, where public housing is often a last resort, Vienna's income thresholds are high. So, the threshold where you don't get social housing is high, so that doctors and teachers also get social housing. So they live next door to social workers, preventing ghettoization. I mean, like that sounds good. I'd like to look into how they set that up. Give me a second. I'll pull this up. Austria. Austria. That's something I'd like to look into. Singapore, the 99-year lease. Singapore is the outlier where the government is the primary developer. About 80% of the population lives in government-built flats. Yeah, Singapore is young, though, doing stuff like this. The ownership illusion, you don't buy a house in Singapore in the tradition. You buy a 99-year lease from the state. Isn't that like what China does? Speculation ban. The government strictly controls resale. The new framework launched in 2018. Live in a prime location, you must live there for 10 years before selling. The government takes a subsidy recovery cut of the sale price to prevent you from getting rich off a public good. Sovereignty over profits. By controlling the land, Singapore has essentially eliminated the landlord class. Finland. Ethical decommodification. Finland focuses on decommodification as a tool to end homelessness. They are the only country in Europe where homelessness is consistently falling. Housing first. Instead of making people earn a home by getting sober or finding a job, Finland gives them a permanent, high quality flat first. I think I've seen that done in the US in places, but like on a very small scale. Converting the market. The city of Helsinki owns about 60,000 social housing units. They've spent the last decade buying up private hostels and shelters and converting them into self-contained apartments with actual rental contract. Like, these all sound like much better systems. The problem is that for decades, we've told people that housing will be your largest investment, that it'll only go up. And in none of these systems is housing your largest investment that only goes up. The failed experiments. It's worth noting that Berlin attempted a massive decommodification move in the early 2020s through a referendum to expirate buyback housing from corporate landlords. However, as of early 2026, this has been bogged down in legal battles and political shifts. It serves as a reminder that once housing is fully commodified, buying it back for the public is incredibly expensive and legally messy. In short, these cities prove that when you take the profit out of the walls, you get more stable, diverse, and affordable communities. But it requires a government willing to act as a landlord for a century, not just a single election cycle. That's going to be hard to do. I mean, I think it's worth doing. Singapore is unique. Finland and Vienna, those are both models I can look into.